Thanks, Scott. Welcome everybody this morning. It's fun to see more names rolling in as we go on. So be thinking of those questions that come up as we go through the content of today, or any questions you have in general. Last week we had a really good discussion. I appreciated the interaction there. So as I mentioned last time, for the last forever, we've been talking about problem spots in relationships, and we finished all of those identified areas through the Gottman research. So we're going to be looking at some relationship building aspects, some things we can do positively, proactively to build intimacy, connection, trust, all of those things, not just the things that get in the way. So today we're going to talk about rituals of connection. Um, Simply put, bottom line here, rituals of connection simply refer to feeling like you have a way of being able to count on your partner to be there in a reliable and predictable way. Sometimes these rituals of connection are as simple as, we sit down to coffee and I was going to say read the paper together, but I don't know who reads the newspaper anymore. Some people do, but maybe we sit down to coffee together, or maybe we share a meal together. For my spouse and I, one of our big rituals of connection is 2 to 3 times a week, we take a hike together with our dog. My spouse identified a couple months ago, she said, one of the things I love about this is the time that we dream together. We talk about our future, we talk about plans, and we can predict that more often than not, that experience is going to be that, just a chance to sync up and to get out in nature. Um, Sometimes rituals of connection can be difficult because one partner may have a higher need for connection than the other one does. And oftentimes, the partner who's not getting what they need will interpret that as a lack of love from the partner who needs less, and the partner who needs less will interpret that as clinginess or neediness. And that, of course, opens the door to a lot of conflict. So it's really important with these aspects of building positive relationships that we understand that we have different need levels. And the reasons why we have those different need levels are really important. There's not a right level of need in relationships. If that were the case, these Match.com and other dating service sites, their claims that their algorithm matches you to people who are more compatible, that would be all it would take. Is you could plug your information into an algorithm and spit out a perfect partner for you. There's always differences to navigate, and it's important to look at them as we have a difference in need here, not to attribute motive to our partner. You don't give me this because you don't love me. Um, it's important to explore the difference in needs first, before making that assumption. When there's an effective ritual of connection, what that means is we're willingly spending time together, and these times together are sources of joy, fun, contemplation, and connection. It can be small events like sitting down to coffee together in the morning, or it can be big things like holidays and anniversaries. I When my first grown-up job that had benefits and everything, they tried really hard to have a culture of connectedness, but they got a couple of things wrong. First of all, their management team was really, they had a lot of contempt for the people who worked under them. So the management team would talk openly about how much turnover there was, and how people weren't as committed as they were. And the other thing they got wrong in this culture is they would mandate time together. So like the office Christmas party, if you weren't at the office Christmas party, you didn't get paid for those hours. You couldn't work through it. And I remember this was shortly after the Will Ferrell movie Elf came out. And I remember there was a lot of hype. The Christmas party was going to be, we rented out a theater and we're going to watch Elf, and there's going to be food and popcorn, and it's going to be really fun. And I remember showing up to a place. I worked remotely for this company, so I remember showing up to this place with people that I didn't know very well, and the people that I did know I didn't like and I didn't feel good around. And the whole time just feeling like, okay, I've got to do my time and then I'm out of here. And like clockwork, as soon as the workday was over, they said, everybody stay, there's games and foods, and the place emptied out. So when we look at these rituals of connection, it's really important that willingness to spend time together is there. It's important that both parties feel joy, fun, contemplation, and connection. It can be a connecting ritual. My spouse and I think in terms of vacationing in each other's world, that can be connecting. But if that's the sum total of our rituals of connection, if it's only the best I can do is tolerate what you like to do, um, it's really hard to build that sense of togetherness and that sense of community, that shared meaning and purpose. Um, as always, it's critical whether rituals of connection are working for you or they're not working for you to understand what the underlying needs are. Some people in the ritual of connection, they want that like deep, I saw into your soul, you saw into my soul. We really solve some interpersonal problems. And for some, it's we spent time together in the same room. You were here with me and I was there with you. Understanding what the underlying needs are helps you to identify how to solve some of the problems in navigating rituals of connection. It's not just a matter of we put it on the calendar and this amount of time, it's good enough, isn't it? We really have to look at, is this meeting the needs that we have? With this disparity in the needs, in coupleships, I think or in relationships, we're always navigating issues of maybe a need for greater autonomy versus greater connection. And sometimes within ourselves, it can be different. Some days I want more autonomy and some days I want more connection. Sometimes it's moment to moment, and it's important to recognize that those needs change. For couples in recovery, I see this issue come up a lot, the need for autonomy versus the need for connection. And generally what I'll see, it doesn't always follow along gender lines, or it doesn't always follow along addict and spouse lines either. But generally I'll see someone who's more anxious about the relationship and really wants to connect more, really wants to feel more a part of things. And so there can be a lot of pressure for sex or time together. And when that doesn't happen in the way that that person envisions or the way that they need it to happen, it can very quickly turn into criticism. You don't spend time with me because you don't like me. And we can get a real like victim perpetrator kind of viewpoint going there. On the other side, with greater autonomy, I'll often see, and again, it doesn't really break down for gender or addict, but sometimes there's a need of, I need to take a breather from this relationship. I need to develop more of a life of my own. I need some more autonomy and some more choice. Not so that I can have secrecy and I can go out and betray you, but so that I can have room to breathe, especially with enmeshment. I see this. And there's often a discrepancy early on in recovery of what people need. And my stance on that is to make sure that you're not going in with the assumption that because you need it, your partner will provide it for you, your partner should provide it for you, or your partner wants to provide it for you. Especially when it comes to qualities of relationships, I have very few couples who come to my office by the point they get to my office that they're saying our relationship works great, except for this betrayal piece. Usually they're saying there's this betrayal piece and it has corrupted everything else in our relationship. Especially time together can be really hard because oftentimes the person that we've become through addiction and the person that we've become through betrayal trauma are not our favorite people to spend time with. And that is something that at some point we have to look at in recovery, especially building these rituals together. Do I make it pleasant for my partner? Do I make it easy for my partner? Do I make it exciting for my partner to want to spend time with me? And I'm not talking about like artificially punching up those categories, but if you're in great emotional dysregulation and the way you know how to handle that is to withdraw and act out, you're probably not great at a party. And so when you run into this, like my partner doesn't want to spend time with me, I go back to that old recovery adage, you've got to earn it to own it. And sometimes that's what we have to work on relationally. I may know how to do what I like to do and have other people watch, but I may not really know how to interact and build joy and connection in that. And that's a legitimate thing to need to work on. So when there's this discrepancy or this protest around maybe we really don't like spending time together, or one of us doesn't like spending time together, it's important to look at yourself and the qualities you bring to that time together, to see if you'd want to spend time with you. to see if you'd feel excited about getting together with the feelings that you can bring to the table. One place to start, and I encourage couples in recovery to do this when it comes time to really focus on rituals of connection, which my opinion is you can't start too early on that, especially if there's a desire to connect. Sometimes you have to go back to something in the past that you valued and that worked well for you, and ask the question, why did we stop doing this? Sometimes, I would say oftentimes, there's things in coupleships that that we started with, or at some point we did, that made us feel some connection. And getting to the why we stopped is really important. In addiction recovery, there can be a lot of betrayal under why we stopped. Well, I felt like you were really close to me. I didn't know who you were. I didn't feel safe to spend time with you. Or when you took your affair partner to do this thing that we did, that was our thing, that was a big betrayal to me, and I don't want to go back to that. Less important than the what did we used to do is the why did that change? And those kind of conversations are really helpful. And the conversations around what is it that I'm needing in these connecting moments? What do I want to feel with you? To get started on those rituals of connection, or to improve them, you have to be intentional. You have to schedule it out. I've had this hike ritual with my spouse on and off in varying degrees of strength over the last 3.5 years. And one thing we've been discovering is we both have to have a recommitment to it on a regular basis. We just had it this weekend. There's no races that we can train for because nobody's getting together right now, but we decided to set out a training schedule. And for this go round, that's our recommitment to this. We're going to show up 2 or 3 mornings a week. We're going to have a good trail run together, and we're going to hold each other accountable for that training. We're going to help each other there. It's actually on our calendars at a certain time in the morning. So you really have to be intentional. You really have to schedule it out, and you might have to start really small, especially if there's a lot of grief and a lot of heartache between you and your partner, or you and the person that you want to connect with. It may be setting aside 10 minutes a few nights a week to have a check-in. It may be going for a walk in uncomfortable silence once a week, just to start kind of flexing that muscle, just to start moving that joint, if you will. And you have to stay focused on it. So for these rituals to actually work, you have to go back and evaluate, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here, and is this fitting the bill? An unintentional tradition that's emerged in my family around Christmas is about every other year. Half of us are so ill we can't go visit other family and participate in the regular traditions. And the first year, it was really devastating because that's something that's really important to my spouse. And my kids really like seeing their cousins and grandparents. I prefer doing my own thing most of the time, so it doesn't bother me. But one thing that we've gotten good at with this rhythm is looking at what's the purpose of us celebrating this holiday. What do we want to get out of it? And with that kind of focus, when we engage in something, going back and evaluating, okay, what did that do for us? Did that fit the bill? Did we like that? It's helped to change some of that narrative around, this is what we've got to do because we've always done this, into a narrative around, when we put intentional time into ourselves, into our family, into anything else, we want to make sure that what we put in has great value, or what we get out of it has great value. So when you're engaging in these rituals of connection, it's really important to have the after conversation. What was that like for you? Is this getting close to what you're needing? You wanted more connection with me. You wanted to accomplish a goal together. How are we doing? That's a critical part of this. Otherwise, the best that we do is kind of bump around blindly and hope that we're finding connection in the end. But I think connection has to be, especially when it's been disrupted or hurt, it has to be much more deliberate than that. So that is rituals of connection.
Thank you, John. That's great stuff. I love that we're on to the positive, like, relationship building part instead of the stuff that pulls us apart. For those of you who joined us late, our topic for today is rituals of connection, which you probably figured out from the discussion. Feel free to ask questions using the Q&A at the bottom of your screen about this or any other relationship topic. And I popped some questions down, but my first question is the one that's in the Q&A right now, about the need for autonomy versus connection. And this person says sometimes the question is there a difference in needs, or is it an avoidance of intimacy on the part of the addict? And that I had scribbled down in different language, that same question.
I see this often taking form with some different vocabulary with addicts. To a degree, I work with everyone that I work with on issues around introversion and extroversion. Not because I think it's this holy grail, but it's a really good way of understanding neurobiologically how you're set up to function. And what I'll find almost without exception is someone who's more avoidant will grab that introverted tag and say, well, I'm just introverted. And that's what it is. There's a giant difference between being avoidant and being introverted. There's a giant difference between being avoidant and having a high need for autonomy. Because the autonomous person can stand face to face with you and say, this is what I feel, this is what I need, and this is how I need to do it. What do you think? An autonomous person is not counter-dependent, or is not so independent that they don't consider what's going on with another person. That's an avoidant person, or like I said, a counter-dependent person. An autonomous person can recognize that they have high value in autonomous activities and alone time, and they actually, like, they come out of that recharged, not just having past time. The avoidant person will retreat to the cave, whether that's physical or emotional or mental, and they'll come out pretty unchanged by that. There won't be a lot of development that's gone on. And so intimacy avoidance is a huge part of recovery from sexual addiction. And that's where I think it's important that to navigate these rituals of connection, there has to be a high degree of accountability and a high degree of being able to accept feedback from each other. Like on my hikes with my spouse, there was a time where I got it wrong. I thought we're exercising together. And so I brought headphones, and this was early on, I learned from this. I brought headphones, I brought music, and I would run. I'm quite a bit taller than my spouse. My legs are longer. So I would run like I could run. And I said, oh, don't worry about it. I'll turn back every 5 minutes and I'll come back to you. And after a while, my spouse said, if that's what this is going to be, I don't need to go with you. I want to talk with you and I want to connect. And for me to chalk that up as, oh, well, this is the time for us to exercise, I had a fundamental misunderstanding of what my partner was asking for. And so the ritual of connection is it's not a rigid, well, I need this, so we're going to do this, or I need this, so we're going to do this. It's really a negotiation. And in avoidance, there isn't negotiation. There isn't talking through the issues. So I still get those kind of runs that I'm capable of. I just don't expect my spouse to come along and be happy about it. I run with other friends who we're much more matched in our physical stature and our ability. When I want to run like that, when I just want to exercise, that's what I do. So there is a really big difference, and it's important to have that high degree of accountability in the relationship, that we're not just calling it autonomy, because that's easier than saying, I'm feeling really avoidant, or I don't know how to spend time with you, or it's really uncomfortable for me. I've never done this before in a mindful way, and it's really uncomfortable. That's okay. That's part of what these rituals of connection can help with, is working through some of that discomfort and some of those issues that might have us leaning out of intimacy rather than leaning in.
Yeah, there's a, it's not a perfect TED talk, but it's a good one by a guy named Johan Hari, and basically I think it's called Addiction is an Intimacy Disorder or something like that. But basically his talk is that addiction is an intimacy disorder, and he talks about the nature of addiction. It's not, we're not weak-willed, amoral people. We are people who are afraid of intimacy. So we turn to a substance or a behavior to temporarily not get our needs met, but to distract from our needs. Um, and we just do that over and over, and that becomes our go-to coping mechanism instead of turning to people who love and care about us, who could
Yeah.
healthfully meet our needs. And usually we learned in childhood because we had a neglectful or abusive or just really inconsistent childhood, that other people can't be trusted when we need them. So we start learning ways to self-soothe, and that tends to be a substance or a behavior, masturbation, porn, and we get validation that way. Affairs are much more about validation than sex. Dr. Rob often says sex addiction is not about sex, and it's not. It's about
Yeah.
escape, and it's about external validation, because we have low self-esteem and shame, all this stuff. And as addicts, we avoid intimacy. This is why I wrote this question down. It's like, you know, you know, you talked about, you have to bring yourself to the table, and what are you offering up to make this fun, and can you enjoy it with your partner? And that's really tough for an addict. Even when we want to do that, particularly when we're early in recovery, it's really, really tough to connect. So when you said sometimes, it might just be going for a walk in uncomfortable silence, I was like, yeah, it might be. And even if the betrayed partner wants more connection, more to be happening there, that might be all the addict can offer at that particular
Yeah.
moment. Um, so what happens when there really is a difference in need, although it's not an unhealthy difference in need? It's just the addict isn't recovered enough to provide what he or she really wants, which may very well match with what the betrayed partner really wants. How do you work through that uncomfortable period?
Yeah, for me, the most critical ingredient there is, are we willing to talk about that and name that? And can we do that without, when you're the partner who wants more, and your addicted partner is not capable of giving it, can you talk about your needs without criticism? So being able to say something like, I really want to look you in the eyes and talk about important things. That's so meaningful to me. And I recognize now that looking me in the eyes for more than 5 seconds is unbearable to you. I would really like you to be able to work on that. I want to help you with that. Or I'd like to see you get some help with that. Those kind of asks I don't think are out of bounds. Oftentimes it's the attitude that we ask in, or the addicted person who's been in long-term recovery, who wants some space and more of that autonomy, being able to say, I get why you're anxious when I'm out spending time on my own or with friends and you're not around. I've given you a lot of reasons to be afraid of that. Um, I need some opportunities to have a life that is private, that's not just all about us, but is sometimes about me or interests that I want to pursue. And I would really like to work toward that, to where we can have enough trust and we can have enough comfort to do that. I want to help with that. So it really becomes this collaborative. How do we create the space that we both need, versus, if you could do this, then we'd be okay. Um, Sometimes, and this goes back to last week when we talked about, or last time we talked about gridlocked issues. Sometimes there's a fundamental difference in lifestyle preference. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, that difference something that I can grin and bear, or the Gottmans identified positive affect, humor, and seeking understanding as the three things that help with gridlock issues. Can I honestly and sincerely show those three qualities, or is this difference in lifestyle so damaging to me and so out of my my integrity that I can't honestly say I'm okay rolling with this. Those are some of those hard questions we have to ask. There are some folks who are addicted to sex that even in sobriety and even in relative emotional health, at the bottom of it, they're a very avoidant person. Like their nervous system is not fundamentally set up to accept a whole lot of overlap, and that may or may not be something that changes drastically with treatment. And that's part of that discussion to have together. Are we really looking at as good as it gets, or do we know that we can continue working and change things? And if this is as good as it gets, how do we feel about that? Can we do this? If we're looking at some of those long-term changes, are we really engaged and accountable in our recoveries and our work together as a couple to allow that change to actually happen? And engagement is not the attitude of, well, it just takes time. That's an important ingredient, but there's specific work to be done if we want to make specific changes. And the mutual commitment to that, or the mutual recognition that there's commitment to that, is really important.
Just a reminder, everybody, if you've got questions, just pop them into the Q&A feature. Any relationship topic is great. So the next one here, this is a great question too. What does a healthy sex life with married couples look like after working through the healing process? Are there any good books or self-awareness couples quizzes to show what to possibly explore within healthy boundaries? So after infidelity, sex addiction, healing, what does a healthy sex life look like for a couple?
Yeah, I would say the building blocks of a healthy sex life are that there is mutual buy-in, there's mutual excitement, there's mutual fulfillment in that, and most importantly, there's mutual safety in that. Before you ever get between the sheets, I think there's a lot psychologically that happens to set the stage. So I think the free flow of intimacy, of ideas, of feelings is a pretty important ingredient to that. I forget who refers to it as this, but I've heard leftover sex referred to, and that's, I have my list of what I won't do, and you have your list of what you won't do, and everything that's not on those lists is what we do together. That's leftover sex. I don't know that that's the best picture of healthy sex. There's really this mutual, let's build something together that's representative of us and is fulfilling to us. Some books that I really like with that, Bill and Ginger Burka, I think it's The Couple's Guide to Intimacy, is a really good book there. There's also a daily meditation book from Alex Kadhakis. It won an award through the, I forget what ASECT is, but through sex therapy, it won this award. It's daily meditations around healthy sexuality. So there's 365 different components of individual sexual health and couple sexual health that get us thinking about, discussing, and practicing healthy sex acts in a ways that's not prescriptive. That's one of the things that I think is most important about a healthy sex life, is it doesn't come from a prescription. It doesn't come from here's the gold standard in health. It comes from, we took a journey together to discover who we are and what we need and what we want. And in a caring, committed way, we work with each other to help that come to fruition. So those are two resources that I like a lot for that. I would also say, even at later stages in recovery, building a healthy sex life is something that I've seen benefit greatly from qualified help. And this, again, where the help you get may not be problem focused. It may be, we've never talked about this before. We've never done this before. We've never been mindful about this before. A trusted guide, I think, can be very, very helpful in building that. And especially because in building that, I think you will come across what's yet to be healed or what's still unresolved. I don't think there's any point in couples recovery where the slate is blank and we're in the clear to go. It's really that we're taking a journey together, and we're going to discover what we have to attend to as we move along.
I love when we're on the same page with our answer. I was digging up links to those books as you were talking about them. I was going to the same place. So I put links to those books in the chat feature. And I also did want to add, healthy sex there is no healthy sex. It's healthy
Yeah.
for you. And every couple is different. Every person is different. Some couples have sex, once a year on their anniversary, and they're really good with that. And other
Yep.
couples, need to have sex 3 times a day. And if they're not, they think they're not connected and they're not together. And, neither is right or wrong. It's just, you have, as long as you as a couple are okay with it, and as Jon said, talk about it and are mindful about it, then it's a good sex life for you. Just because your neighbors have a different sex life, that's their sex
Yeah.
life, not yours.
Yeah. Amen to that. It really is individual. It goes back to that understanding the underlying why, I think, is really what is the key ingredient in healthy sex life. There's one more book up there, Scott, if I could have you find a link. I can never remember the name of it. Oh, here it is. Mirror of Intimacy. That's the daily meditations book. And that's even,
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I put up erotic intelligence, didn't I? Which is
Erotic intelligence is also fantastic.
Yeah.
But Mirror of Intimacy, you can actually, I think she does like 3 emails a week that are meditations from the book, just as they're printed. And that's something that I've seen for couples who want to learn, and even individuals who want to and are ready to really kind of expand their awareness and their basis of sexual health. That's a really accessible way to start, I think.
Yeah, and the nice thing about a book like that is it's bite-sized, and you can do it together every day.
Yep.
So it's a minute or two where the two of you are together and thinking about it together, in a way that may or may not be comfortable for you, but as you get used to it, it'll become more comfortable, and you'll become more comfortable sharing about your needs and wants and desires, as will your partner.
Yep.
And I think it's a great way to develop connection. That can be a ritual of connection. Just reading a daily meditation like that.
Yeah, I also just have to show this. The reason why this book is on my shelf, I was at a training and I saw this cover, and I was like, I don't care what book that is. I've got to have that on my shelf. That's beautiful, and it really is. Just the book itself is a beautiful book. I have a copy of it that I haven't ever cracked because I want to keep it in pristine condition, and then I have my study copy. So it's good to have around for a lot of reasons.
Just as artwork. So,
yeah.
Okay. Ask questions in the Q&A. So yeah, we've got plenty of time left, so put some more questions in there. Excuse me. I am reconnecting with my spouse, and he is really a changed man, but I'm having subconscious fears. I feel nervous and anxious, and I don't know why exactly. Or are these just my inner child fears from my own attachment trauma from my narcissistic family, or is this a relationship thing? How can I know the difference? Good question.
Yeah, really, really good question. I would say the short answer is it's probably a matter of both and it's important to have, I think, an orientation in both. Your body's telling you something for a reason. Even if it's trauma related, the body doesn't tend to go into trauma response just because. There's something in the environment that's reminiscent, that's cueing. And so it's really important to, with a lot of gentle curiosity, explore what that's about for you. If you feel like there's some confidence in your spouse, and there's a level of trust, even bringing some of those concerns and feelings to your spouse. I'm having those feelings again, like I did when, can we talk about what's going on? Can we talk about how you're doing? I want to tell you how scared I am. Those attachment wounds, like you talked about the inner child and the trauma from the narcissistic family, those attachment wounds can follow for a long time. And I think the question there, how do I know the difference? It's a really curious question, because operationally, I wonder how much that would change for you, whether this is coming from the past or this is coming from your current relationship. To me, it seems like the path forward is very similar. And first of all, that's get safe and get grounded, and work on being able to get the perspective to where you can see what's really going on for you. A lot of times I'll hear people say, well, if that's just coming from my family and not my partner, I can set aside what I'm feeling and engage with my partner. It doesn't work that way. Um, Again, what you're feeling for a reason. And sometimes I'll see that a lot of the attachment wounds, they actually come up when the couple starts doing better, because there's something to compare it to. Maybe we've worked really hard for a few years and we've got a relationship that's really solid and really safe, and we've actually done the work. And now what I start feeling is what I lost as a child because I didn't get that in my family. Or I start feeling what I lost early on in our relationship or other relationships where I wasn't safe. Um, I think those feelings and those triggers are always an invitation to remember where we came from, and that it was hard and it was valid and it was real. And the answer to grief and trigger is not always, can I set this aside and just be healthy and engaged? Sometimes the invitation in that is to grieve and feel some of the feelings. So I think the best way to tell what's going on is to engage in your environment and check it out. Engage inside as well, and check it out. A lot of times when we have a PTSD type trigger, the body and the brain say, you got to figure this out right now because we're under threat. That's the hallmark of PTSD, is that the threat assessment is really high, maybe when it doesn't need to be. And that's where I really champion a calm, compassionate, curious approach, because being able to answer that question, what's really going on for me, and being able to engage on that level of, there's something valid happening and this is an opportunity to care for myself. That's what I see healing those wounds, regardless of whether they came where they came from. So, to sum it up, I would say, stay curious and stay with it. Talk it through with people that you trust, and don't feel too anxious to move to, I have to know what this is and the solution right now, because there's a lot. I think it's often way more complicated than something that a singular solution fits. When it's trauma related, it's often a kind of lifestyle that we need to engage in order to heal that trauma, not just a thing that we do when the trigger comes up. And I definitely think that anybody is worth that kind of investment in self, to be really calm and compassionate and curious, and to figure out exactly what's happening for me and why, what am I feeling, and then to care for yourself in that vulnerable place.
Yeah, there's research looking at betrayed partners of sex addicts, and almost universally they experience the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Doesn't mean they actually have post-traumatic stress disorder, but they have symptoms based on that trauma. Learning that the person you thought would never betray you has betrayed you is a really painfully traumatic thing.
Yeah.
And it's going to take, and your trust has also been shattered, and a loss of the ability to trust someone, I think, is traumatic. And those things can't be overcome overnight. And you talk about your spouse, it's clear he's in recovery, he's making progress, but you're still having subconscious fears. You're not going to be able to fully trust him for a year or more, most likely. I mean, is that right, Jon?
At least, if you can put a time frame on it. I usually say a year or more, because that gets the point across, is it's not going to come fast. It's the difference between opening your eyes and seeing light and a gradual sunrise. It's much more of that gradual sunrise process.
Yeah, and it'll get a little bit better and a little bit better, and then it'll backslide, and then it'll get a little bit better. It's one of those processes, but eventually you wake up one morning and you'll realize that, you know, you haven't questioned what he's doing in a whole week, and you'll think, wow, that's cool, that's nice. You know, you haven't had those subconscious fears in a week or 2 weeks or whatever. What else did I want to point out there? I scribbled something down. It'll come to me. Oh well. So ask us some more questions. The Q&A is open right now, but I do have a question for you, Jon.
Yeah.
You talked about this, and Dr. Rob talks about this in his Out of the Doghouse book, about reconnecting. It's really a process, and it's a slow process. And a lot of times couples need to schedule time. But it's also good to have spontaneous time, and you know, he kind of addresses that. When there is a scheduled time, are there exercises that, let's say you and I are trying to rebuild our connection and our intimacy, are there some exercises that you and I, or you and your wife, you're married, we'll go with your wife, I'm not going to make you gay. You know, you and your wife, she just found out you cheated, and the two of you want to reconnect, but you're struggling with it because you're the addict. What are some exercises that the two of you can do together? Really simple things that might only take a minute or two, or, you know, what can people do?
Yeah, so one of my favorites, and you have to be ready for this kind of proximity, and you have to be willing for this kind of proximity, but you stand toe to toe, knee to knee, hip to hip, shoulder to shoulder, and you hug. And you hug until two things happen. And this is without words. You hug until you feel yourself relax, and you hug until you feel your partner relax. With two people who have a reasonable level of commitment to each other, that's the way that it will go if given enough time. Our nervous systems are set up to co-regulate safely with another person who is safe enough. And so I like that exercise for some of that ritual of connection, because while it's really intense, you don't have to talk about anything. You're hugging, so you don't have to look each other in the eye, which can be really intense. And you're just standing there kind of noticing your own body. And when you feel yourself relax and you're guessing that your partner's relaxed, you might say something like, okay, it feels like you just relaxed. Is that accurate? And you kind of get this check-in. So it's starting really, really basically on the level of, what does it feel like to just share space with you? And can I tell enough about how you're feeling? And can I still tune into what I'm feeling as we're in this space together? I also like things that are related to the day in, day out life together. What I'll see in a lot of couples when there's intimacy disorder, sex addiction, and betrayal is they really bifurcate the running of a household or a life together. And they may feel like we're working really, really well together, but the best they're doing is parallel play. There's no intersection. So intentionally setting up one of those intersections, it may look like, let's make a meal together once a week. Or we've got this, maybe there's a maintenance task around the house. We're going to do that together. Like, you know, most of the days my dog gets a walk. We're doing that together. There can be some things like, you know, grocery shopping together, or, you know, those making the bed together can be one of those rituals of connection that's really easy. The thing is not so much the thing that we've scheduled, it's more, what's our intention behind this? Can we share a moment together? Can we do something that adds to the feeling of well-being that we both contributed to? Unless there's a whole lot of conflict between you and your partner, and your relationship can tolerate a little bit of risk, I think one of the best things you can do is experiment, gather some ideas. What would we be willing to do together? What do we feel excited about? And try it out and see. Maybe it was a big dud. When I was dating my spouse, we both had it in our heads that one of our things was going to be playing board games together. But when we actually practiced that, it was the first serious fight we had. She didn't appreciate my creativity when we were playing categories. At least that's how I tell the story. She calls me a cheater. But that was something that we discovered as we thought this would be a great thing. As we did it together, we discovered that there's if it gets competitive and gets head to head, it's not connecting for us. If it's fun and relaxing and just kind of like something that helps hold space while we have a conversation, that's great. But that knowledge came through trial and error.
And what about, scheduling date night? We're going to do something we did when we were recording.
Yeah.
How does that work? And,
that I'm a big proponent of scheduled date nights. It can be hard if there are fears around commitment, and if there's fears around being able to repair, going back to, well, this is when we were recording, that can be triggering for some. For some, it's let's go back and reclaim this and rework this. So you really want to work together and decide what the meaning of that date night is going to be, what the intention of that date night is going to be. One of the couples that I worked with, their previous connection rituals were so fraught with betrayal that their date night had to become, they would actually trade off in each week. One would head out in planning something, and the rule was they had to do something that they hadn't done together before. So they were trying new things, and their date night was all about creating new experiences and new connection, not going back to the old favorites. So again, you'll want to talk that through, but I think date night is a pretty accessible, most people at least know the basics of what that includes: grabbing something to eat, doing some kind of activity. And again, keep in mind that in the beginning, you may not be able to tolerate something for more than a few minutes. So don't plan to push yourself like you would if you were, training as an Olympic athlete. If you get to the point where you feel like you need to throw up or collapse after, you've probably done too much. I often tell couples the goal in engaging in these rituals of connection is to have a good enough experience in it that you're willing to do another one. And so really manage those expectations and shoot for something that's attainable rather than what ideally we want this to look like in the future.
Thank you. Okay. I like this question too. My husband and I are presently working with our therapist on the Couple's Guide to Intimacy by the Burkhalls. The link is in the chat feature. It's a great program and I'm hopeful, but I'm having huge fears around showing him my body or having him touch my body in a sensual way after all the betrayal with porn and the sexual rejection for decades. Do you have any suggestions around feeling paralyzed by fear and truly not knowing if I can ever show him my body again? I can't compete with the girls he's been using for his needs, and I don't know if I can handle any confirmation that I don't turn him on anymore after all he's seen. So tough. I want to jump in before you do real quick and say,
yeah.
If that's all right, sex addiction is not about sex. Porn addiction is not about porn. He's not using porn because they're prettier than you. He's using porn because it's an emotional escape for him. It's not a referendum on you. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Jon.
Yeah, that's part of what I was going to say, and I would also there's a specific mode of therapy that I find really helpful with this. So I'll talk about the principle behind why I would use this mode of therapy, and that might give you some direction where to start. As we go throughout life and experiences, one of the ways that our brain is set up is to identify ourselves with strong feelings and identify ourselves with strong emotions. Like take, for example, a feeling of danger or threat. Let's say you go river rafting and you get tossed out of the raft and you don't know how to swim, and the people around you don't know how to be safe, and you leave the water with this immense amount of terror of getting back in. That feeling is there to help you survive. It's marking like water and me are not a good mix right now. Let's have a strong reaction here that says stay away. Sometimes those feeling states are useful long-term. It's useful. Like one of the things I've discovered for me emotionally, it's always useful for me to pay attention to that sick feeling when I get the feeling or I hear from somebody that they have an expectation of who I am and what I can do that is not me. That sick feeling says, step back, differentiate, make sure that you are not going along to please here. There's other times where we can get feeling states that while they were useful at one time, they may no longer be useful for us. There's a mode of therapy I'm trained in. It's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it's developed and designed specifically for that, being able to uncouple feeling states or rearrange feeling states that may not be useful any longer. The key is a lot of times when we try to think through, okay, how should I feel here? And I hear this in the question here is maybe there's this, okay, we're at this point, we're working on this and I don't feel this way. What's wrong with me? The truth is we don't know what's going on with you right now. And for you to be able to step back and get really curious and go to those feelings, where do they come from? And examine those. A mode of therapy like EMDR helps your body and brain decide what's still useful for me to feel. It may be that the way that this concern is coming up, I don't want him to see me and I don't want him to touch me. And the story I'm telling myself is it's because what he's seeing. And maybe the truth of it is I still don't feel safe with him. I don't feel seen by him. And so I don't want to take a risk with him. What you're feeling may still be useful then. It just may be the story you're telling yourself might be off. And so those opportunities to kind of step back and really feel the feelings and immerse in it helps you know what it's really about and helps your brain and body know whether or not that's a feeling state that's important for you to honor and hold on to, or whether it's time to let go and challenge yourself. And that's something that I don't think any therapist or any professional or any book can say, here's the time where you push yourself and here's the time where you honor what you're feeling. That's a decision and a recognition you have to come to on your own. And so being able to if you're engaged in some individual therapy, this is a really good thing to bring to your individual therapist and afford yourself some compassionate, loving space to just step back and say, okay, what is going on here for me? What am I really feeling? What have I started feeling that I haven't been able to finish? And what are the truths that I have not been able to express? And there's, like I said, EMDR is one mode of therapy that's really, really good at helping people kind of uncouple the feeling that's no longer necessary or rearrange the feeling in a way that it's useful and not just blocking you at every turn.
And nothing requires more vulnerability, particularly from a woman, and this question came from a woman, than being sexual. Taking your clothes off and literally physically, not just emotionally, but physically kind of opening yourself up. Yep. That requires a tremendous amount of trust and safety. And if that's not completely back in your relationship yet, I mean, this is a really normal reaction. I mean,
yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I would say there's nothing, I'm not hearing anything that sounds abnormal or odd to me. The key is to, again, come to that recognition, what I write here, understand the underlying need here. This is how your body and brain are manifesting something that's going on for you. And my philosophy is if it's going on, it has a place. We may not have the story completely right to where it brings us peace and understanding and perspective, but trusting what's going on for you serves a purpose, and letting yourself pull back to discover what that purpose is, I think is a really kind thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah. I deal with, I just kind of wanted to reiterate my first point, which Jon also hit, is, I talk to addicts all the time and say, why did you have that affair? I don't know. She's not as attractive as my wife. She's not as interesting. She's not as smart. She's not as funny. I don't know. And that's the power of addiction, is it just drives us to these behaviors that have nothing to do with the person we love. It doesn't mean, so anyway, time for one more quick one maybe. Can you help me figure out, my spouse never stopped contacting, helping or providing for his ex-wife. He did this behind my back for years. Can you help me understand why he did this? What was it about?
Oh, wow. I would, to really answer that question fully, I'd have to talk to your spouse. and know what's going on there. Sometimes there can be a false sense of empowerment that comes from keeping a secret and monetarily caring for people. And that's important. I think it's important to address in a full recovery. What is your relationship to money and power, and how do you use that? Again, this is one of those feeling states that we can be connected to that no longer serves us. For me, being able to contribute to providing for a life that me and my partner are excited about, and that it's, you know, fulfilling dreams and stuff, that's a huge source of pride for me and a huge source of identity for me. If it came to a point where, you know, we split up and I was committed to somebody else, and that still was a point of pride for me, there's a misalignment inside of me that I have to figure out what that's about. Because now this is no longer an agreed upon thing that I'm doing to build a relationship. It's about something else. And a lot of times there can be that denial in the person who's doing the supporting in secret, saying, "Oh, I'm just trying to be a good person." I don't buy that completely as the whole reason. There's something else that drives that, and that would be something that I would, you know, almost have as a part of boundaries. I need you to examine this. I need you to figure out what was going on here, because this is really upsetting to me. This is a betrayal to me, and I need to know that you know why you're doing this, so that you're not just prone to do this again and tell yourself that it's fine when in fact it's not with me in our relationship.
So this really could be a form of cheating, you know,
Yeah.
keeping a really important secret. Yeah. So
that's really the bottom line here, is there's a part of life that's hidden and in secret and involves a commitment to another person, which is the definition of intimate betrayal.
excellent. Thank you, Jon, and thank you everybody for being here and for your great questions. We will be back in 2 weeks. It feels like it's been like a month since I last saw you. I don't know, but anyway,
It's not working as it should these days.
yeah. So thank you everybody for being here. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks again, Jon. Anything you want to say to take us out?
No, just thanks for coming, and thanks for the great questions, and I'll look forward to being back in a couple weeks. See ya.